Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to Watchbox, and it is that time again. We are waking up with watches as ever. Everything you see here on the channel is for sale. Reach out to me directly, tmosso at thewatchbox.com for purchase and pricing. Or if you'd like to sell one watch or even an entire collection, we are buying. And you can sell by reaching out to that same tmosso at thewatchbox.com email address. Names, references, and where possible, prices are in the description below. Let's jump straight in. One of the most discussed watches of 2019 was actually my favorite Tudor Black Bay. While I realize the P01 is a controversial watch, it has folks who are passionate in both ways. Those who love and those who hate. There is no middle ground with this watch. 42 millimeters in stainless steel, it recalls a prototype built for the US Navy in 1967. That one was 40 millimeters. This one is 42 and substantial in every way. It's hefty, though a 42, I'd say 55 millimeters lug to lug, it wears a little bit more like a 44. Throwing it on the wrist, you can see why I say that. It's a broad watch across the wrist with a vintage, evocative, minimally beveled case flank. So as you can see, it's very squared off, sheer, and industrial. It's a cool looking watch, and if you're sick of Tudor mass producing Black Bay knockoffs and duplicates, the bottom line is this is like no other model in the collection. It's got a cool bezel mechanism derived from the original. They are different in how they function, but you can see what this does is it effectively locks a rare bidirectional diving bezel, and I have to say the sound of this detent is unusually crisp for a bidirectional bezel. They're normally not this sharp. Take a listen. And of course, once you have adjusted accordingly, you lock it in place. Also note that this particular bezel is a 12-hour bezel, not a 60-minute bezel. I happen to like the dial, which features well-coated cream simulated patina, although not a cloyingly dark simulated patina. You'll also note that Tudor went the distance, matching the date disc to the color of the indices and the hands. You've got that off-centered 4 o'clock crown with rather rustic and again rather industrial crown guard structures that I happen to like a good deal. The strap's an unusual one with unusual attachment. As you can see, it's double pivoted with hinge style lugs, and then the strap is a little bit of a hybrid as it's rubber on one side, and you can see the imprint of the Tudor snowflake style hour hand in the underside of the strap, and there's also a deployant clasp with the Tudor shield for the locking mechanism. All of this is stainless steel. Just in case you're wondering, it's not a titanium watch, and unlike the original, there is a sapphire rather than plexiglass. Inside, 3-day power reserve caliber MT5612 stop seconds, quick set date, silicone hairspring, and a COSC certified Swiss chronometer. All of this 200 meters water resistant. Take a look at it on the wrist one more time. I recommend wrists of 15 centimeters circumference or larger. Now, let's talk about a watch that I've actually owned and loved. Possibly the most innovative chronograph of the 2000s. This is the 2006 JLC Amvox 2, a watch inspired by the imagery of Jaeger dashboard clocks, tachometers, and speedometers in Aston Martin cars during the 20th century. You can immediately see some imagery that recalls those dashboard instruments, the radial array of the numerals, the fact that the lower portion of the dial is left open as it would be on a speedometer or a tachometer. You can also see that the specific fonts used recall automotive imagery, and then you have hands at center that recall the calypso hands of the dubiously authentic but quite famous Italian market Polaris 68 models. You'll also love the fact that this is a vertical trigger pusherless chronograph, 44 millimeters in titanium. I loved mine, 750 pieces, a limited edition. It's grade 5 tie, so very hard and scratch resistant. You operate the chronograph by pushing the trigger up at 12 o'clock. So that's stop, that's start, and then down at 6 o'clock when it's stopped, you can see how once I unlock it, I can reset. Now that's key. You can lock out the reset if you wish, so you don't accidentally fat finger a reset while it's in motion. And you can block the actuation if you wish. That's what the lockout slider on the side does. The idea is when you're wearing gloves, either as pit crew or race car driver, you can't operate fiddly little screw down pushers like on a Daytona, so they give you a big target. The crystal itself actuates the watch. Now it's also a wonderfully loomed watch, so I'm going to do a loom shot of this one and then also the P01. You can see with the Amvox 2, not only is black luminova used on the numerals, but you can see full luminescent discs of luminova are used for chronograph hours and minutes. Bring back the light for a second. And now we're back with the P01. This is probably the only time the P01 looks like a standard Tudor dive watch. All right, can you guess? If you guessed Rolex Submariner, you were right. This is the Hulk, well known, well loved, always sought, and surprisingly, never hotter than it is right now. Though it launched a decade ago, this timepiece has been enduring, charismatic, charming, and oddly polarizing, as a lot of folks love and a lot of folks hate the green Submariner. Whether you love or loathe, there is no disputing that it is a very wearable 40mm watch, only about 12.8mm thick. It's surprisingly cuffable for a diver. Now, when this watch first debuted back in 2010, the dial was described as green gold. Rolex later backed off that nomenclature, and I'm not sure why. Maybe it didn't meet the statutory standards to be described as gold. Maybe they were trying to prevent compromise in Islamic markets. I'm not sure, but I will say that the sunburst metallic green dial still looks like what I imagine green gold would be. Now, this is the gold standard for dive bezel feel and sound, so let's have a listen. It's very precise. With 120 clicks, it manages to be both silky and sharp at the same time. Ceramic insert and gloss green, and then you've got glide lock built into the clasp, which is a wonderful adjustable system, 10 increments, 2mm each, up to 20mm, full fold-out dive suit type extension, or you can use it as an adjuster for fine-tuning the fit and the size. 48-hour power reserve COSC chronometer, 300 meters water resistant. Now for something completely different. We're sticking with Geneva, but we're going back to 2009 when Patek Philippe's officer's watch was last redesigned wholesale. This is the 5153G. 38mm in white gold with a rose lathe guilloche center dial. It is a handsome and evocative piece that is designed to remind you of the origins of the wristwatch. It would have been a converted pocket watch worn on the wrist of a World War I officer in the trenches when there were no hands for pocket watches. Pocket watch cases were fitted with straight welded-on lugs, bars fixed in place by screws, and oftentimes, because they were converted pocket watches, they would also feature hunter-style casebacks or hinged reverse display access ports. Today, a sapphire crystal underneath allows you to view the caliber 324 SC, 45-hour power reserve, of course, high quality finishing. As you will note, it features the traditional Gyromax style free-sprung assembly with a silicone anti-magnetic hairspring. Internally, you can see the reference of the watch as well as the mirrored inside that serves as a template for customization if you do wish to have your watch engraved. It's the best of both worlds, as you get the solid gold caseback, but you also get the option of viewing the movement if you desire. Nicely finished inside and out. It's a watch that wears well, though larger than 38 would imply, as most 38s don't have lugs of this strength or span. I recommend it for a wrist nevertheless as small as 13.5 centimeters circumference because overall the size is very accommodating. It's a handsome option, a unisex option even, and with a combination of white metal and black dial, sportier than any hinged caseback dress watch has a right to be. Sticking with traditional sizes and dress watches, we're talking about one of the greats. This, of course, is the Langematik, a timepiece automatic, 37.2mm, and as you can see right here in Noble Platinum 950, this watch is precious metal within precious metal. Let's start with the basics. The dial itself is made of sterling silver, and then it is galvanized, the silver tone you hear. The case is made of platinum. So sterling silver dial, 37.2mm platinum case. You have a zero reset system for the seconds. Note that it doesn't just hack, it's zero resets right to the index, so you can set this one precisely. It's also loomed, which makes it unexpectedly practical. Now you have a pusher adjuster system for the date, and of course the panorama datum, a Lange signature. Big, easy to read, and fun fact, this date mechanism was originally a JLC patent. Flip it all over and you have the Saxomat caliber, which was teased on the dial side. I mentioned precious metal inside precious metal, and you can see that the rotor itself is 21 karat hallmarked gold, and then the mass in the rotor is made of platinum 950. I don't know of any other watches that use a double precious metal rotor. Hacking seconds, of course, 46-hour automatic winding power reserve, German silver bridges with nickel, copper, zinc, copper, giving the bridges that golden hue. Note black polished cover for the escape wheel, black polished swan's neck regulator, and then a freehand engraved half bridge for the balance underneath. Beautifully executed with satination underneath the rotor and engine turning double concentric. This watch puts it all together right down to the polished and blued screws and the mirrored anglage on the edge of every bridge. Throw it on the wrist real quick. As a platinum watch full of precious metal dial side and case back, it's heftier than you'd expect a roughly 37mm watch to be. Nevertheless, because it is not a big bully on the wrist, I can recommend it for wrists as small as 13 centimeters in circumference, another excellent unisex option. Sticking with our dress watch theme, let's talk about one of the most underrated brands in the dress watch segment. We speak of Lange, we speak of Vacheron, FP Journe, and Patek. Many other independents often mix in, and they're all hot right now, but historically, and I mean only since the Swatch Group arrived in 2000, Breguet has invested more heavily in finish and technology than any other brand, and this 5177 is emblematic of it. Now, the model debuted in 2006, 38mm in rose gold. It's only 8.9mm thick. Let's talk about all of the ways this watch is special. First, the case flank. It's cold rolled to create this coining, and then hand finished to remove any messy evidence of the forging process itself, so that cold rolling creates the coining. The lugs are then welded on with all of the evidence of the welded joint removed, so you have that sharp break between case band and lug profile. Note that the lugs are held on by screws and bars, not spring bars. That is the secure way to put together a high-end watch. Appreciate the dial. There is a sort of dimple-style track outboard of the hours, then you have a concentric circular brushing, you have the engraved Breguet secret signature 12 o'clock, and then a rose lathe cut basket weave motif over the center. The dial is made of solid gold, it's cut on a rose lathe operated by a guilloche, and it is then silvered. The hands at center are fired blue steel. The watch features a lovely stepped date aperture. The watch has both hacking seconds, and if you wish, there is a quick set date, so you can rapidly select the next day. Turn it all over, and you can see not only has the dial been rose lathe cut, but the case back features a rose lathe cut rotor. The movement is caliber 777Q, free sprung for toughness, automatic winding with a 55-hour power reserve, and it features a silicone anti-magnetic hairspring. You could see the balance itself is a recessed bolt design that is intended to minimize aerodynamic losses in motion. Now you can see all of the standards of high horology finish are present. All screw heads black polished. You'll note the same on the regulator cap, the stud holder. You will appreciate that the Côte de Genève across the bridges are deeply ridged, thick, lustrous, and luminous, and every edge is mirrored with a handsome anglage. And if you take a close look, you can see two interior angles adjacent to the balance, so even the tough finishing arts have been executed. The timepiece is thin, broad, flat, handsome, rare, and almost entirely handmade and hand finished. Don't bother with the Calatrava, it's overhyped. Vacheron's great, but ultimately a family-owned company like Patek Philippe, a group-owned company like Vacheron, an independent like FP Journe, none of them have it on Breguet. So while it might be part of the Swatch Group Death Star, the bottom line is Breguet is very much a group brand that still operates with the heart and soul of an independent. Okay, this will be our sports watch transition. No, it's not a sports watch, but it is decidedly versatile. Arguably the best watch you can buy if you're only going to own one watch, and built from the early 1990s into the early 2000s, this is the Zenith El Primero Chronomaster T, triple calendar, caliber 410, 40mm in stainless steel. It is a COSC chronometer, a triple calendar, a moon phase, and a high beat El Primero automatic column wheel chronograph. It has a lovely case profile with fluted lugs and a double gadroon bezel. As you can see, the watch handsomely made, and I should mention easily fit on any wrist, is the perfect size. At under 46, or I should say 47 millimeters lug to lug, it wears well on a wrist as small as 13 centimeters. It's only 13 millimeters thick. The timepiece is gorgeous, powerful, punchy, imposing, and in spite of its lack of size, it has incredible presence. This is the ultimate watch, and you can own the ultimate watch for very reasonable money. Prices are in the description below. Let's take a quick look at the caseback. Caliber 410 here with a serial number on the rotor. Though these were produced past 2002, after that period they would not have included a COSC chronometer certification. You know you're looking at one of the chronometer certified watches because it'll have a serial number on the rotor, and of course it'll say chronometer on the dial. Let's take a closer look at the dial. No expense spared. Applique numerals and indices are used, not printed features. There is a small tachymeter outboard, so it's a sporty watch, not quite a sports watch. And then you have the 36,000 vibration per hour column wheel lateral clutch El Primero movement, which you can see in action, column wheel, lateral clutch, and all. It beats at 10 beats per second. And remember, by virtue of an early press conference, the El Primero did become the first integrated automatic chronograph caliber back in 1969. Not the first to market, but the first to announce, and the only one of the original that are basically still in production. The other two movements, they didn't have the legs of the El Primero. Now over half a century old and still going strong, this remains possibly the most influential and important chronograph caliber of all time. If you're wondering what the other two were, they was the Seiko 6139 and of course the Caliber 99 Chronomatic project between Breitling, Buren, Hamilton, now, and Heuer. Now, let's talk about the next generation of the El Primero. Launched in 2017, this is by far the rarest version of the Zenith Dayfi El Primero 21. Now, the watch has a 1/100th of a second foudroyant that can time, well, 1/100th of a second. As you can see, it is spectacular with a power reserve at 12 o'clock for the second movement and the second barrel that operate the complication. I say this is the rarest model because this 44mm grade 5 titanium Dayfi El Primero 21 is the solid dial Panda, which I find the most attractive and probably the most enduring style. The open dials are hot now, but they look a bit generic. They're very much of our era, and they kind of look like an LVMH house style, since Tag and Hublot have their own versions of that look. This is much more distinctively Zenith. Now, the watch does have an interesting heartbeat, as you have a traditional El Primero with 10 beats per second, and you can see through the case back. I'm going to get as close as I can here. All of this is 100 meters water resistant, but you can see there's a high rate escapement that operates at 360,000 vibrations per hour, and then there's the El Primero at 36,000 vibrations per hour. I should mention that the one with the silicon escapement is actually the 36,000 vibration El Primero movement, and then the small one that has a conventional set of metallic lever, wheel, and pallet stones, that is the high beat movement. You can see because the silicon escapement on the standard watch, it has long intervals between overhauls. Automatic winding, 50-hour power reserve for the time, 50-minute power reserve for the chronograph, and it is a COSC certified Swiss chronometer, just like the Caliber 410 you just saw. A very cool watch that is superbly water resistant, complicated, and hailing from one of the great houses in high horology, it also has an impeccable pedigree that frankly Hublot and even Tag Heuer can't quite match. Though the watch is large, you can see it's only about 50 millimeters lug to lug, which makes it viable on a small wrist, and in grade 5 titanium it's both very scratch resistant and very light. An awesome timepiece and one of the most interesting innovations of our era with the 1/100th of a second chronograph. It also features an interesting hack seconds feature. You'll note the chronograph runs independently of the time. One can function without the other wound, but you'll note that the constant seconds has stopped. This was the first ever El Primero to feature hacking seconds. And why not? Let's do a loom shot since it's now so easy for me to do that. The Dayfi El Primero 21 by night. Okay, and even more committed sports watch is the new for 2019 44mm stainless steel Omega Seamaster Diver 300-meter chrono, vertical clutch, column wheel, 60-hour power reserve, master chronometer, anti-magnetic with silicone hairspring, 300 meters water resistant with a helium escape valve. You are getting a lot with this next generation Diver 300-meter chrono. Though it's a 44, it wears friendly on a small wrist, 15 centimeters circumference, maybe even 14 and a half. You're probably going to wear this one well. The watch is thick. It's 17.2 millimeters, so it's not one to disappear underneath the cuff. Then again, given the price, you're going to be able to buy this and a proper dress watch both. Let's have a listen to the bezel. The action and the sound are both the best I've ever experienced on a Diver 300 meter. You have a ceramic insert for scratch resistance, and it's a 120 click just like the Rolex. As you can see, line up with the skeleton-style James Bond minute hand, we'll call it by the common nomenclature, and you'll also appreciate that the Omega Wave is back on the current generation of this watch. The dial is also made of ceramic. You can see zirconium oxide, the formula just below the cannon pinion at center. So the dial is lustrous, gleaming, glossy, immune to oxidation, tarnish, water damage, contact damage. Basically, it's all of the enduring and beautiful qualities of enamel without the fragility or the cost. This is an awesome timepiece, and yes, we're going to do a lume shot. Tri-level coaxial, the latest, and you'll note that Omega thought of everything with green bezel pearl and minute hand, so you can more easily tell the two apart from the rest of the features while diving in the dark. This isn't quite a dress watch, and it isn't quite a sports watch, but it is a rare and spectacular watch. The second generation Zinn Reference 1800 Damaziner, Damascus style steel, 43 millimeters, 100 pieces. For the 2018 model year, you can see that this is number 36 of 100. It does feature all tegimented steel, so it is both a folded and etched Damascus-style layered stainless steel, and it uses Zinn's carbon diffusion process to create a surface hardness of 1200 Vickers, and it actually penetrates fairly deep. So this is not like the treatment you see on Seiko Diashield or Bremont plasma arced watches. This is very deep. It is fairly dent resistant. It is almost impervious to scratches and scuffs. And you can see that the case itself is an intriguing monoblock, as the case and the bezel and the dial are all one piece of steel. This is created in Frankfurt by a company that does the folding and etching of the stainless steel for Zinn to create this layered look. The company Zinn then teguments or carbon diffuses the metal to make it hard, but because it is all one piece, you can actually follow the waves of the folded pattern through the case band, into the bezel, and then down across the dial. Applique indices gloss black, you can see hands to match, and the watch features more attention to detail than the first generation model. This watch features Damascus steel for both the buckle and the pin of the pin buckle, and if you look closely, it's also used on the crown. That was not true of the 2015 hard black model, which had a conventional crown and pin buckle. The watch is thin, and as you can see, though 43, it wears easily on my 16 centimeter circumference wrist. Nice, flat, and flush. This is how Zinn does a dress watch. It's still 100 meters water resistant, automatic winding, and of course, very, very hard. This is a watch that's fully loomed, and we're going to do a lume shot. I can recommend it for a smaller wrist and a tight cuff. A great way to get into Zinn if you don't necessarily love their aggressive sports watch styles. And then we're back with a lume shot of the Damaziner Reference 1800. Super cool. If you're into Damascus style knives, you're gonna love this watch. And even if you're not, you're gonna have to agree, this watch looks sharp. Sticking with the Zinn brand for a minute, we're going to talk about one of the everything but the kitchen sink Zinn watches. In terms of Zinn proprietary technologies, the 2014 to present Easy M9 test-off has all of them. 44 millimeters in titanium. It is tegimented titanium, meaning it has that 1200 Vickers surface hardness. You'll also appreciate that it has the AR dehumidification system. The AR used to be a argon fill and then a copper sulfate capsule to pull any moisture out of the case. Today, they nitrogen fill the case to drive out oxygen and moisture, and then the copper sulfate capsule, which is replaceable, is inserted to draw out any residual humidity as well as any that might intrude on the case. Now the watch is also extremely resistant to temperature fluctuation. Another Zinn proprietary technology, it can handle negative 45 degree or plus 80 degrees centigrade. And as you can see, the Zinn captive bezel arrangement is present and correct, with the bezel held on by screws so it can't accidentally snap off on impact. You'll also note the initials SUG between the lugs. That is Zinn's proprietary case-making company, so they make the case here. You're also getting a sapphire insert over the bezel, just like a Blancpain 50 Fathoms, so the entire bezel can be loomed. The watch is nice and thin. You can see on my wrist that is the case. Although it's a 44, it wears flat, it wears relatively compact and super light thanks to the titanium. It is also Testov certified in conjunction with the University of Aachen Aerospace Sciences, a standard effectively like the dive watch ISO, but for pilots' watches was created, and then Zinn adhered to this standard that was co-developed, which is a combination of legibility, functionality, and durability, and this watch has all of those. In addition, though it is a pilot's watch, you'll note it's 200 meters water resistant, so very, very resilient in every regard. We're going to do a loom shot here, but you can see this watch is the very definition of bright, and although only a little bit of Zinn's hard black surfacing is used around the crown, that is over 1800 Vickers hard. So let's do a loom shot. This one's gonna pop. A circular supernova, and note, they have loomed the seconds hand. Every seconds hand on a hardcore sports watch should be loomed, and because of that sapphire cap, you can afford to loom the whole bezel without any danger of the loom being scratched off by surface contact. Here's a sports watch that has a definite dress watch flair. A model launched last year for the 50th anniversary of the Apollo moon landings. This is officially the 50th anniversary Apollo 11 Speedmaster Professional Moonwatch. 42 millimeters in stainless steel, the watch features what Omega describes as moonshine gold, which I would describe as a sort of pale gold, evocative of vintage 14 karat. Now the watch uses a sapphire crystal and it has a ceramic bezel insert. You'll also note a few refinements on the dial side that set it apart from a standard moon watch. You've got the vintage Omega logo and applique Omega marquee. You have all applique indices rather than the standard watch's printed features. You can see right at the numeral 11, you have a numeral 11 to remind you that it was Apollo 11 that went to the moon, and then you have a solid disc of moonshine gold that has been black PVD coated and then laser ablated to create the image of the man and the lunar lander on the surface. You have the vintage Omega logo on the crown, as well as externally on the clasp, and if you look carefully you can see that the links of the clasp have been designed to echo a circa 1969 Omega Speedmaster Professional vintage bracelet. There is also a limited edition count here, and you can see it is a limited edition appropriately of 6,969, and some limited edition Omega Speedmasters are more interesting than others and more important historically. This is one of them. There is another laser ablated image of the first step on the moon on the reverse side. And then inside the case, you have caliber 3861, which is the first ever coaxial chronometer Moonwatch caliber. It has a silicone hairspring, it is free sprung, it has an extra 2 hours power reserve for an even 50. It is a master chronometer, and it is one of the best tuned cam chronographs you will ever encounter. So you have all of that technological sophistication, the external styling refinement, the dress-up features of the watch, bezel, dial, bracelet, vintage logos, 42 millimeters. It wears like a standard Moonwatch, but it is much finer in every regard. One of the most important Moonwatch limited editions ever. It's also one of the most important Omega timepieces of all time. You can always have another Speedmaster limited edition, but you can only have a 50th anniversary watch once. And this watch is full of famous firsts for the Omega Speedmaster line. Nevertheless, I have no emotional attachment to that one. This one, on the other hand, is going to be my first Rolex. Famously launched in 2014, the most cheerful Rolex of all time, and I'm including the Stella dials. This is the Milgauss Z Blue. How do I love thee? Let me count the ways. 40 millimeters, 100 meters water resistant, anti-magnetic escapement, soft iron inner cage around the movement, and a niobium zirconium blue oxidized anti-magnetic hairspring. The chance that this watch is only Milgauss anti-magnetic is about 0. I suspect it is significantly more anti-magnetic than the original namesake Milgauss models. Now, the dial side is spectacular. First, you have the GV green tinted crystal. Second, you have that lightning bolt seconds hand, which, believe it or not, is true to the 1950s Charter model. They were more fun than you imagined back at CERN in the 50s. The watch, of course, also features orange accents about the seconds and minutes track outboard, the orange Milgauss logo, and of course the Z Blue dial, which can best be described as an approximation of a sort of plasma blue created by high voltage electrical arcing. It's like wearing a lightning bolt on your wrist. It's also very comfortable, just under 50 millimeters lug to lug. This is a unique model in that the end links don't really project beyond the case. Dimensionally, it's identical to the Air King, the current generation Air King externally, but this watch has so much more color and character behind it. This is proof that Rolex can crack a smile. I adore it, I want it, I will own it. It will be my first Rolex watch. And hell, let's do a loom shot. The Milgauss, blue by day, blue by night. And now for something completely different, a 350-piece stainless steel limited series for 150 years of IWC. This is the Portofino hand-wound moon phase edition 150 years. The dial is a 12-step hand-lacquered, hand-buffed, multi-layer coating designed to evoke 19th century IWC enamel pocket watch dials. You'll also note that the timepiece features a panoply of complications. You have your moon phase, which can be quickset. You have your date, which can be quickset. You have an 8-day power reserve indicator, which tracks the 8 days of reserve de marche of this watch. Now, you also have blued leaf style hands for your sub registers, as well as the hours and minutes. The watch is 45, but it doesn't wear like a 45. If you remember the fried egg, I believe it was the reference 5251 giant Portofino of the 80s, that is the model this 350-piece anniversary edition is designed to evoke. That watch and this watch are linked by lineage and style, but mechanically, this watch is leagues beyond the original. As you can see, the rose gold, solid rose gold medallion in the case back, there is a lot to love about this caliber 59800. First, it is free sprung with a handmade Breguet overcoil hairspring, 5-position adjustment like a chronometer. You can see that this is based on the 50,000 series automatic, but unlike the automatic, which is a 7-day, this is an 8-day. You can see the enormous barrel under the barrel bridge, and of course the 30 jewel movement is specific to this model. Being hand wound, it also gives you the opportunity to interact with your watch, and with a quickset system for both the moon phase and the date, you have the opportunity to play with a fun, crowd-pleasing, and eminently romantic complication, even as you accurately adjust the practical everyday complication. My favorite IWC dress watch line is the Portofino, and this is one of my all-time favorites, the edition 150 years with handmade multi-layer lacquer white dial. It's not quite bone white, it's got a little bit of off-white aged cream to it, and it is sublime. I always like to throw in a budget proposition, something that a dude who's just getting into watches can pick up right away and keep for life without any compromise. And this circa 2007 Breitling SuperOcean is not. Now, this model of the SuperOcean was made from about 03 to 2010, and this one features a bracelet manufacturing code of 2007. The bracelets are generally made around the same time as the case. There will be a code between the lugs if you want to double check, but circa 2007, this 42 millimeter 1500 meter helium escape valve equipped diver is everything you love about Breitling without the bloat. Very wearable at 42, it is super comfortable, distinctively Breitling with the Cobra yellow dial, a COSC certified Swiss chronometer, and it has all of the Breitling styling cues right down to the slash cut professional 2 style bracelet. The watch includes Breitling's captive bezel system, which is built like the Zinn bezels, and those two companies are the foremost users of this unusual construction by which bezels are held on by screws. It is much sturdier than the snap-on system used by Omega and Rolex. You can also see just how thick that sapphire is in order to make the extraordinary 5,000 foot water resistance possible. You get a helium valve standard here. Rolex forces you to upgrade to a sea dweller from a sub to get that. Now inside a 2.824 in chronometer spec, which means it is the highest grade of the movement. The bezel detent is excellent. Have a listen. It's sharp and precise and 120 click, just like the Rolex and the Omega. And you have rider tabs, a signature of Breitling design that makes it easier to grip the bezel with wet, sweaty, or gloved hands. Hacking seconds, quick set date, will do a quick loom shot, a very cool watch, and as hardcore as divers get. You can see by night the SuperOcean has plenty of loom, and the seconds hand is loomed. I consider that essential on divers. My autofocus is not cooperating with me, but this is a watch that's bright day or night, and a great way to get into luxury horology without any compromises at all. Okay, second to last watch, penultimate, Series 3. FP Journe Tourbillon Remontoir. Now, I wanted you to be able to see the tourbillon carriage at a stop, which is why I haven't wound this watch. But you can see filigree style, wire carriage, all black polished, overcoil hairspring, free sprung, 6-position adjustment. A few features to take note of here. First, you can see the uneven coloration of the dial. This is characteristic of those early watches, which were very handmade and had a little bit of a varnish on the dial, which tends to age unevenly. It's the Journe patina. You'll also note that this watch is a Series 3, meaning it has the large bolts on the dial side, but it also has the flat Remontoir cock that came after the first two series, the subscription and then the Series 2. About 220 to 320 of these Series 3 watches were made. They're extraordinarily scarce, and this one is fully documented, box and papers, as a 2001. The watch, of course, featuring a Remontoir d'égalité and a power reserve indicator. Note that the power reserve works like a marine chronometer, so it indicates 0 when fully wound. That's the hours since winding. The tourbillon is hypnotic, but the real horological refinement of this watch is the linear titanium spring, the Remontoir, that acts as a buffer between the mainspring barrel and the escapement. So for approximately the first 28 hours of power reserve, the amplitude of the balance is constant, so the timekeeping is outstanding. You'll also note, probably my favorite feature on this watch is the continuously rounded and specular finished or black polished half-sided bridge or balance cock, or I should say carriage cock, because it's not just the balance, it's the whole assembly. It is mirrored, rounded, and completely smooth, optically flawless all the way around. This is a 38mm rose gold case that is a particularly pale rose gold. These early watches also include the brass movement, rhodium plated for that silver tone, and then of course these are the Eleanor cases that were made outside of Paris by FP Journe's original case constructor. As a result, they feature the Eleanor maker's mark, but they also feature both French and Swiss hallmarks. This is the creme de la creme of vintage Journe. If you want to get into the core of the brand's origins, you want to get a tourbillon Remontoir from one of the first 4 series or the Ruthenium series, and you want to get yourself a brass movement res. Easy to wear on any wrist. The watch is only about 44mm lug to lug, super thin, flush, essential Journe, outstanding condition, absolutely rare and delectable. I'm not a Journe fanboy, but I have enormous respect for this watch, bordering on honest affection, and I rarely have a watch crush on FP Journe timepieces. This thing is just spectacular. That said, I have a debut, both for the brand and the model, on Watchbox Reviews, and it is the 2019 to present Gronefeld Principia 1941. The horological brothers of the Netherlands, Tim and Bart, highest of high horology, former APRP guys who still do contract work for their old employer, and it shows in everything they do. The watch is extraordinarily handcrafted, rare, and, as I should say, beautifully sized. The case, as you can see, is stainless steel, so you're not paying a precious metal premium. The case construction is artful. Note the sculpting of the bezel, symmetrical at 12 and 6. Note the sculpting of the lugs with fluted flanks, concave mirrored surfaces, and evacuated relieved profiles, conical deeply knurled crown, blue python, Gronefeld factory strap. Even the pin buckle is thoughtfully designed to echo the flowing form of the lugs. The bezel is concave and mirrored. The dial, featuring black polished applique indices and fired blue steel hands, the dial is made of sterling silver. This was the first automatic watch from Tim and Bart, and as you can see, the movement is spectacular. As you can see, and I just keep saying that, it's self-evident, I need not explain. The bridges are stainless steel. It is excruciating to finish steel bridges, and yet not only do they do it without compromise. With anglage a mile wide, you can see it without a loop. Also note that there is a raised border to every bridge, and that border separates the frosted centers from the beveled edges, and the border is all of satin finish. Every screw head black polished with chamfered slots in circumference. You'll note they've skeletonized the full balance bridge and added interior angles closest to the balance staff. They've also added a free-sprung architecture with a full bridge to make it very shock resistant. Automatic winding, you can see they black polished the center surround of the rotor. They also added multiple finishes, including mirrored beveling, that same raised satin finish channel, and then the frosted center that you see on the bridges. 56-hour power reserve, very wearable on a wrist of any size, hugely charismatic. You fall in love with this watch, both the look and the fit. They are fun guys. If you want to know your watchmakers and know that they're good dudes who love their customers, then you want to get into a brand like this that's small and stays close to its owner base. With Gronefeld, you get the best of everything in one 39.5mm case. Guys, thank you so much. As ever, remember, whether you want to buy or sell, reach out to me directly, tmosso@thewatchbox.com. Names, references, and prices in the description below. Time out, Tim out. Stay safe, stay healthy, and thanks for logging on.